He says the rarest and most beautiful of the flowering plants I discovered on this first grand excursion was Calypso borealis. So we know that Calypso borealis is a rare and beautiful flower, okay? The hider of the north. I have been fording streams more and more difficult to cross, and wading bogs and swamps that seemed more and more extensive and more difficult to force one's way through. Entering one of these great tamarack and arborvitae swamps one morning, holding a general, though very crooked course of compass. So he's saying he was kind of going along one way, but also kind of weaving right in and out. Struggling through tangled, drooping branches and over and under broad heaps of fallen trees, I began to fear that I would not be able to reach dry ground before dark, and therefore would have to pass the night in the swamp, and began, faint and hungry, to plan a nest of branches on one of the largest trees or windfalls, like a monkey's nest, or eagles, or Indians in the flooded forests of the I'm going to butcher that, Orinoco, described by Humboldt. Humboldt is another writer. Okay. Notice the detail that Muir is taking to point out literally everything that he's seen, right? It shows again his respect for nature. He's not just like, oh yeah, there's another plant. Oh, there's another muddy little spot. He really takes the time to appreciate and notice what it's offering him, like visually and aesthetically. But when the sun was getting low and everything seemed most bewildering and discouraging, I found beautiful Calypso on the mossy bank of a stream, growing not in the ground, but on a bed of yellow mosses in which its small white bulb had found a small nest, and from which its one leaf and one flower sprung. So now we kind of get why it's very rare. It has literally one leaf and one flower, right? The flower was white. Think about connotations with white, and made the impression of the utmost simple purity, like a snowflower. No other bloom was near it, for the bog, a short distance below the surface, was still frozen, and the water was ice cold. So he's kind of saying, like, this is the only one that's like sitting there, right? And it's a little bit of like a shock considering how the ground is right now, that it's even still like there. It seemed the most spiritual of all the flower people I had ever met. Ooh, that's an interesting, right? He considers them flower people. He didn't just say plants or flowers. He made like a reference to humans, right? Remember that connection with nature, how we interact with nature? It's showing that he treats flowers and plants like he would a person. I sat down beside it and fairly cried for joy. It seems so wonderful that so frail and lovely a plant has such power over human hearts. This Calypso meeting happened some 45 years ago, and it was more memorable and more impressive than any of my meetings with human beings, excepting perhaps Emerson. Emerson's a very famous writer, and one or two others. When I was leaving the university, Professor J.D. Butler said, "John, I would like to know what becomes of you, and I wish you would write me, say once a year, so I may keep you in sight." I wrote to the professor telling him about this meeting with Calypso, and he sent the letter to an Eastern newspaper, the Boston Recorder, with some comments of his own. These, as far as I know, were the first of my words that appeared in print. How long I sat beside Calypso I don't know. Hunger and weariness vanished, and only after the sun was low in the west I splashed on through the swamp, strong and exhilarated as if never more to feel any mortal care. At length I saw maple woods on a hill and found a log house. I was gladly received. Where ha ye come from? The swamp, the awful swamp? What are you doing there? Etc. Mony a pure body have been lost in that muckle, cold, dreary bog and never been found. When I told her I had entered it in search of plants and had been in it all day, she wondered how plants could draw me to these awful places and said, "It's God mercy you ever got out." Hey, notice again Muir's interaction with nature. He did not pick the flower. Most of us, perhaps, would be tempted, right? You find a very rare flower. You want to like pluck it and bring it home, right? And like put it in a vase and make it so beautiful. He did none of those things. He sat down beside it and enjoyed like the beauty that it gave him, and then he left it. Oftentimes I had to sleep without blankets and sometimes without supper, but usually I had no great difficulty in finding a loaf of bread here and there at the houses of farm settlers in the widely scattered clearings. With one of these large backwood loaves, I was able to wander many a long, wild, fertile mile in the forests and bogs, free as the winds, gathering plants, and glorying in God's abounding, inexhaustible spiritual beauty bread. Storms, thunderclouds, winds, and the woods were as welcomed as friends. So I think for many people, if they encountered storms, thunderclouds, and winds, it would be like, ugh, right? I don't I don't want to be in this. This is awful. But he says that they were welcomed as friends, like it's a part of nature, right? Just like your friends, there are some things that maybe your friends have, like personality attributes that you're like, I could do without this. But you love them as a person, and so you deal with it, right? Kind of like the same thing. He's saying that, it's part of nature, the storms and thunderclouds. This is like all part of it. And so just like a friend, I welcome it. It's part of how it is. All right. So it says most essays are broken into paragraphs, and there's 6 paragraphs in Calypso Borealis. All right. So we're going to look at each paragraph. So you can like check your understanding for each one. I'm going to let you do that yourself. I kind of broke down each one, right, for you. All right. Actually, I'm thinking about this. Let's go back. We're going to look at it together. All right. Let's look at the first one together. First paragraph. What is he describing? It says after earning a few dollars, and he kind of like goes through all of his remember the different things that he's noticing, right? The different trees, the different flowers. So it says, what is Muir describing in this paragraph? Obviously, we said he's describing, all of the plants that he saw. Okay. Then, why won't it? That's really hard to see, you guys. I don't know what's wrong with this. It says, what is his central idea in this paragraph? That he went the wrong way and regretted it? No. Says that he was working on something. And he said he went on his first of many long excursions.